Dear friends, English literature, Elizabethan and Jacobean drama, Macbeth by William Shakespeare, short questions with answers. Short questions 10 to 19. Question 10. How does Lady Macbeth pursue her husband to murder Duncan? Answer. When Lady Macbeth enters, Macbeth tells her that he will proceed no further in this business. But Lady Macbeth warns the old king must be killed at all costs. She refers to his previous promise and to his fickleness of mind, not worthy of a brave soldier. While Macbeth admits to her that his golden reputation might lose its claws, she sets out to strengthen his resolve and by mocking his perceived weakness. She adds a distinction between masculinity and femininity. In contrast to her own self-proclaimed manliness, she pours scorn upon her husband's lack of courage. She tells him he is green, a coward, and that he resembles the proverbial poor cat who wanted the fish but would not get his paws wet. Finally, and most damningly, she tells him that she herself would go so far as to take her own nursing baby and dash its brains if necessary. She counsels him to screw his courage to the sticking place and details the way they will murder the king. They will wait until he falls asleep, she says, and thereafter intoxicate his bodyguards with drink. This will allow them to murder Duncan and lay the blame on the two drunken bodyguards. Macbeth is astonished by her cruelty but resigns to follow through with her plans. Thus, in order to persuade her husband to murder Duncan, Lady Macbeth uses her persuasive eloquence to the best of her power. Question 11. Describe dagger scene in Macbeth. Answer. The dagger scene is one of the most impressive scenes in the whole play. The scene is transacted off the stage, but Shakespeare has portrayed the scene so vividly that we seem eyewitness of the scene. The whole of the dagger scene is narrated in a soliloquy of Macbeth. The scene occurred just before Macbeth commits the murder of Duncan. While waiting for the signal from his wife that the guards are drunk and fast asleep, his imagination begins to work and he sees a visionary dagger with a handle towards his hand. He tries to seize the dagger in his hands but fails to do so. He finds the dagger moving in the air and pointing to the room in which Duncan sleeps. It is like a dagger which he wishes to use in order to murder Duncan. Next, he sees drops of blood on the blade and handles of the dagger. Then he comes to the conclusion the dagger is not a real dagger. It may be a dagger which exists only in his mind, just an imaginary thing produced by an overheated brain with abnormal fancy. Question 12. A comment on the significance of the dagger scene. Answer. The dagger scene is important because it advances the action of the play to some extent. The dagger is the projection of Macbeth's murderous purpose. He himself realizes that the dagger is not a real one. Its handle is towards him. It indicates that it is encouraging him to hold it. The drops of blood on the blade and handle suggest the heinous crime which Macbeth is going to commit. Thus, the dagger is a symbolic instigator of the crime, the murder of Duncan. The whole scene reveals the inner working of Macbeth's mind. Commenting on the significance of the vision of the dagger, Professor Percival says, in the vision of the dagger, the supernatural is again at work. It may be that the witches directly sent his vision. It may be that it is called up by the witchcraft of his own heated imagination, which thus becomes an infernal wizard within his breast, spurring him on deed to which the other witchcraft that outside him was all along been luring him, or it may be due to the both witchcrafts. Question 13. Describe Macbeth's state of mind after committing the murder of Duncan. Answer. After stabbing the sleeping Duncan to death, Macbeth returns wild and panic-stricken and tells his wife that he has done the deed. He tells her that as he descended the stairs, one of Duncan's two sons who were sleeping in the adjoining room laughed in his sleep, and other cried murder in his sleep. In this way, the two sons woke each other up. But the next moment, they offered their prayer to God and prepared themselves to sleep again. He again said that one of them cried, "God bless us," and the other said, "Amen." Hearing their cry fear, Macbeth tried to say Amen, but he could not utter the word because the word struck in his throat. This had terribly unnerved him. When Lady Macbeth tried to quiet him, he said that he also heard a voice warning the sleeper to sleep no more, for Macbeth had murdered the sleeping king. The mysterious voice further predicted that Macbeth should sleep no more, for he had murdered sleep. In such a confused state of mind, he had brought the daggers back. Her wife bade him go and replace the daggers with which he refuses to do. Thus, after committing the murder, Macbeth is almost in a state of trance with the horror of what he has done. Question 14. How does Lady Macbeth appear as a courageous woman after the murder of Duncan by her husband? Answer. After stabbing the sleeping Duncan to death, Macbeth, in his confusion, brought back the daggers with him instead of keeping them by the side of the sleeping guards. Lady Macbeth asks him to go back to keep the daggers in the right place and besmear the guards with blood so that the guilt may fall on the guards. But Macbeth is feeling too frightened to go back and look at what he has done. She thereupon accuses him of lack of courage and undertakes to do the job herself. She snatches out the daggers from his hand and sharply points out the dead and sleeping persons are no more to be feared than painted pictures. So there is no reason for being frightened of the dead Duncan and of the sleeping guards. It will be childish on the part of Macbeth to be afraid of going back to Duncan's room, and then just to shame her husband, she very sharply and boldly asserts that she herself will place the daggers in the right place, and if Duncan is still bleeding, she will besmear the faces of the guards with his blood so that it may appear that the guards have committed the crime. Thus, Lady Macbeth appears as a courageous woman who snatches away the daggers from her husband's hand and smears the guards with blood. Question 15. Describe the Porter scene. Answer. After the murder of King Duncan, Lady Macbeth and Macbeth had heard a knocking at the south entry of the castle. The knocking grows louder and more frequent. A porter walks slowly to open the doors, imagining herself as the porter of the hill gate, where sinners are knocking for the entry. He tries to identify the man who is knocking at the door. At first, he thinks that the knocker is a farmer who committed suicide in expectation of a plentiful harvest. The farmer may refer to John Garnet, whose nickname was Farmer and who may have encouraged the infamous gunpowder plot, the aim of which was to murder the English king. When the porter hears more knocking at the door, he says maybe there is an equivocator at the door. An equivocator is a person who speaks ambiguously or doesn't tell the whole truth. This is likely an allusion to the treatise written by a Jesuit Henry Garnet, who encouraged Catholics to speak ambiguously or equivocate when they were being questioned by Protestant inquisitors. When there is more knocking on the gate, the porter fancies that it is an English tailor who used to steal cloth when making garments for his customers. Thus, the porter imagines that those who knock at the gate are sinners and they have come to enter the hell because they cannot gain an entry into heaven. Question 16. What information is provided to Macbeth by apparitions? Answer. On a dark and stormy night, the three witches are hanging out in a cave, roasting marshmallows and chanting spells around boiling cauldron into which they cast all sorts of nasty bits from lizard leg to the fingers of a bird-strangled baby. Hecate enters, announcing something wicked this way comes. Macbeth promptly follows. Macbeth says he has some more questions about the future and he wants some answers from the weird sisters immediately. The witches add some more ingredients to the cauldron and then apparitions begin to appear, each addressing Macbeth. Number 1. The first is an armed hit summoned to warn Macbeth that Metcalfe is coming back to Scotland to ruin him. Number 2, the second apparition is a bloody child, and it tells Macbeth that no man born of a woman can do him harm. This gives Macbeth great confidence. He welcomes this good news, and assuming Macduff was born the natural way, Macbeth thinks he has nothing to fear. Number 3, the third apparition is that of a child wearing a crown and holding a tree. It tells Macbeth that Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. Macbeth is sure that the third apparition's prophecy will never be, for who can impress the forest or beat the tree and fix the earth-bound roots. I repeat it, but beat the tree and fix his earth-bound roots. Question 17. Describe Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene. Answer. When Macbeth is busy assembling his men to fight Malcolm, Lady Macbeth is left alone in the castle at Dunsinane. She is left to brood over the murder Macbeth has committed at her command. Her guilt and fear follow her even in dreams, and she begins to walk in her sleep. Her gentlewoman calls for a doctor who watches for 2 nights, but does not see Lady Macbeth come out of her chamber. But on the 3rd night, he observes Lady Macbeth walk down the hall with a lantern, rubbing her hands violently as if trying to wash away a stain of some sort. She sighs, weeps, and mutters about the murders of Duncan, the murder of Banquo, and the murder of Lady Macduff. She also refers to the knocking that was heard at the gate after Duncan's murder. The doctor and the gentlewoman are shocked as Lady Macbeth has inadvertently revealed the sources of her distress. The doctor's comment on the behavior of Lady Macbeth is that unnatural deeds do breed unnatural troubles. He leaves the castle, knowing that no doctor can cure what ails Lady Macbeth. More needs she, the divine, than the physician. Question 18. What changes do you notice in the character of Lady Macbeth in her sleepwalking scene? Answer. The sleepwalking scene shows the effect of guilt on Lady Macbeth. She also depicts her feminine qualities. In the earlier part of the play, she was a strong-willed and hard-hearted woman. It is she who urges her husband to assist Duncan to become the king of Scotland. But now her iron will is completely collapsed. A bitter struggle between will and memory of her guilt is raging within her. The crimes have begun to weigh heavily upon her mind and allow no rest even in her sleep. Her conscience has become a source of torment to her. The woman who said on the night of murder, Duncan, that little water clears up the deed, now says that all the perfumes brought from the Arabian will not be able to impart fragrance to her little feminine hand. Lady Macbeth's words, "What's done cannot be undone," not only reverse her earlier argument to her husband, "What's done is done." Now she is just the opposite of what she was at. Nemesis has overtaken her. Question 19. Describe the scene in which Macbeth was killed. Answer. Macbeth is in his war room waiting Malcolm and his troops. He is overconfident of her victory. He knows that he cannot be defeated until Birnam would remove to Dunsinane, and a man not of woman born kills him. But when a messenger reports that the woods are moving towards the castle, as of Malcolm's man carrying a branch of tree in front of him, Macbeth is quickly distracted by the news, of which he is all around bad news, because the said grove is likely Birnam Wood. Macbeth decides to go out and face the army, leaving his fortress. He meets young Seward and calls him a liar and challenges him to fight. Macbeth easily kills the young man, but the noise of the fight attracts Macduff, and he runs to confront Macbeth. Macbeth tells Macduff that he does not fear anyone because anyone who was born of a woman. Macduff, however, tells Macbeth that he was removed from his mother's womb by a caesarean operation and was not technically born of a woman. On hearing this, Macbeth curses the witches for misguiding him by making ambiguous prophecies. Macduff kills Macbeth and returns to Malcolm with his head lanced into a pole. All of the men hail Malcolm as the rightful heir to the throne. Thank you friends for watching my video.